Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're going to be talking about the 1992 crime thriller film directed by Carl Franklin and co-written by Tom Epperson and Billy Bob Thornton, who also stars in this movie, and that little movie is called One False Move, originally released in 1992, and we're going to be talking about its Criterion 4K Blu-ray that just came out. So One False Move was an independent film released back in 1992. It was only made on a very small budget of $2 million, but it had a really hard time recouping that money at the box office, only taking in $1.5 million because it was originally supposed to be sent straight to video, but they sent it out to a couple cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Seattle, I believe, to get reviewed by some critics who all gave it really 5-star, 10 out of 10 reviews. Gene Siskel actually put it on one of his top 10 films of the year back in 1992.
Now my pick of the best film in 1992, and in recognition of the spirit of independent, non-studio filmmaking, I'm selecting Carl Franklin's One False Move.
Got a little bit of traction, gave it a theatrical run, but ever since then, this movie has been pretty much forgotten. All the actors in the movie have gone on to do things that they're more well known for, and even Carl Franklin 3 years later directed probably his most famous film that he's directed, Devil in the Blue Dress, which also has a Criterion 4K Blu-ray release, which is a pretty good movie, but I actually think that One False Move is a better movie. And this movie, besides starring Billy Bob Thornton, also stars Bill Paxton in a perfect role for him, Michael Beach, and really in a great performance, one of her best performances that I've ever seen her in, Cindy Williams. She's magnetic in this movie, perfect casting. She is just so beautiful, and the camera lingers on her perfectly in this film. You really get invested in her character because this movie seems like a very straightforward thriller. At the beginning of this movie, 3 drug dealers played by Billy Bob Thornton, Michael Beach, and Cindy Williams rob a house. They end up killing, I believe, 6 people, and now they're on the run. Cindy Williams had a life before this back in Arkansas, and that's really where a lot of this movie takes place, is in Arkansas, and that's a big theme of this movie, is the difference between the big city of Los Angeles and the small town world of Arkansas, where Bill Paxton plays the chief of police. And this is what I mean about Bill Paxton being perfect casting for this movie. Bill Paxton always plays those very innocent, naive characters perfectly, you know, who always mean well, who always try to do the best that they possibly could, but they're also a little bit simple. They're not the brightest crayon in the box, but they always mean well. They always have the best of intentions, and that's what his cop does. But, you know, these Los Angeles cops show up to work with him to solve these murders, and, you know, they kind of making fun of him because he just wants to do the right things, but he wants to also be a big shot cop.
Me and him and Macintosh make a hell of a team. He said he wanted to take a crack at the big time. Jesus, what did you say?
Be appreciated for what he knows, for his knowledge, and he plays that perfectly. And you think for the whole movie, like, he's this innocent, naive guy, and then it builds up to the third act, and you realize that this guy is a much more layered character than we first realized. And that's the best part about this movie, and that's why you bring in Carl Franklin, the director, who Billy Bob Thornton and him were talking about the fact that really the reason why they hired him is for his 1986 short film Punk, and also he didn't really cost too much money, but Billy Bob Thornton just absolutely loved his work, and he wanted to have him direct the movie. And I really think that what Carl Franklin brings to the table is these moments, these character moments that end up building up to a third act, because the character moments in this movie, those small scenes like where we see Billy Bob Thornton and Cindy Williams talking, or Bill Paxton talking to the other cops and really like pouring his heart out, like these moments really help to develop these characters, and we start to understand each of these characters differently. Michael Beach, who plays Pluto, is just so good in this movie. He gives just a standout performance of this man with a really high IQ, and you're just trying to figure out where did the mistakes come, because we don't get any backstory on Billy Bob Thornton or Michael Beach's character. We just get really this movie is about Cindy Williams' character and Bill Paxton's character and their connection to Arkansas and what led them to go down the lives that they have, because this movie's also dealing with racial issues, especially racial issues in the South, and just how black people are perceived compared to white people, how they're treated when it comes to the law. That's all being dove into here, but also the movie is just telling a great thriller. Like, are these characters going to get away from what they did in the beginning of this movie? And the movie seems like that the path that's going on is leading up to this fantastic conclusion, but it builds up to this conclusion so well that you're still somehow blown away by what happens at the very end of this movie. The ending of this movie is fantastic. It shocked me. I was like, oh my god. I forgot, because I had seen this movie once before, but I had completely forgot about the ending of this movie. So when we were building up to it, I'm like, how does this movie end? Because I was looking at the time and I was like, it's got to be coming to an end pretty soon. and then it does, and it just absolutely shocks the hell out of you. Really just a great ending to this film. The only thing about the ending to this movie, and just really the whole movie in general, is you can kind of tell it was made for a very low budget, because the crimes that are committed in this movie, you would think that there'd be a worldwide manhunt for these guys, but really it's just taking place in a small town, and they're just trying to solve the murders themselves between just really Bill Paxton and these two LA cops, which it would be a much bigger manhunt. And I think that's where the budget of this movie really shows, and that's probably one of the biggest flaws in this movie, is you have to take a lot of leaps in logic, but the movie is just so heartfelt, and you care about certain characters in this movie, characters you probably wouldn't care about. Like, a lot of these characters are operating in the gray area. Bill Paxton's really supposed to be our shining knight. You know, he's even playing his character like a cowboy almost, and that's supposed to be the guy, you know, the white hat wearing, our hero of this movie. But even he has some really deep layers where you have to really reflect on yourself looking at this guy, like, is this guy really a hero? And I just love how they portrayed his character in this movie, and how they portrayed every character in this movie. They all have layers to them. They all play their characters perfect. The four main leads in this movie are all just amazing. I really do appreciate all of their performances. The score of this movie really helps to drive the drama along really well. It feels like an early 90s movie. There's one scene when they're in an apartment, and I felt like I was in that apartment growing up. I was like, wow, right down to the blinds and the kitchen table. Like, they just captured all of that stuff perfectly. Like I said, the only real flaws in this movie is just the leaps in logic in the screenplay that you have to really buy into, and I really think that's just because of the low budget that this movie is made for, that they couldn't really, you know, have the really big scope that they probably wanted for a script like this. But this is a movie that I really particularly enjoyed. It's one that I'm going to be going back to often. It's really funny too to see Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton working together here on this movie, because they would actually play very similar roles, you know, not down to the same exact letter, but very similar roles in the Sam Raimi film, I believe in 1998, A Simple Plan, which is a very good movie as well, but they do have the very similar scope. And this movie actually felt like a Coen Brothers movie, which I thought was strange. It felt very simple to the Coen Brothers' first movie, Blood Simple, and also felt similar to 1996's Fargo, both, you know, kind of taking place in small towns and dealing with similar issues. So I thought that that was pretty cool, actually, when I was watching the movies. The first two movies that popped in my head were Blood Simple and Fargo. But this movie, I think, stands on its own. I think it's a very enjoyable film, one that flies by. It's only 105 minutes long. No scene is wasted. And again, you're going to get invested in these characters. And I really do think it's one that you should see. Is it a flawless film? No, but it's one that I think that you're really going to enjoy if you haven't seen this one yet. But anyway, let's dive into this 4K Blu-ray review. But before we do that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, lists, and podcasts, and shorts, we try and do them all here on the channel, and nothing helps this channel out more than just by you simply liking this video and subscribing to the channel.
Okay, now ma'am.
Alright, here it is. One False Move on 4K Blu-ray, courtesy of the Criterion Collection. This is a 2-disc set. It doesn't come in their digibook pack, and honestly, it kind of feels like a second-hand release from Criterion, where it doesn't get all the bells and whistles of some of their premium releases, like Thelma and Louise, Malcolm X, Menace to Society, you know, where we get the really nice packaging. It very much feels a little bit bare bones, but that's kind of how this movie has been treated throughout its history. This was a very hard film to get on physical media before this. I actually was trying to get this movie a couple of years ago, and I just gave up because I couldn't get a really nice Blu-ray release. From what I was able to find out, those previous releases were in pretty rough shape, and this 4K definitely is a good 4K. So before we get into that, just want to show you guys the packaging. Now, I appreciate more, like, if you guys could see behind me here, this is the original theatrical poster. I prefer the original theatrical poster and its colors over this poster. I understand what they were going for here, and it's still very nice. I do like the bottom. This is a very iconic scene in the film. I like how that's on the bottom of the front of the box. That's pretty cool, but I would have preferred, personally, it's just a personal decision, the original theatrical poster, just because I love the colors. I love purple, pink, and orange, like a sunset. Basically what that poster was going for. You go inside, you get one 4K disc and one Blu-ray disc. You get a nice little essay right here, which I really do appreciate. You get artwork underneath that, which is just a cover of the newspaper reporting on the 6 murders that happened in LA before they headed out to Arkansas. And on that first disc is going to be your 4K disc. You have no choice of audio options. It's just a DTS HD 2.0. I was reading Blu-ray.com's review for this, and they said that originally this was supposed to have a DTS HD 5.1, but they don't know what happened, so I'm not too sure what happened either. But the audio track on here is really solid. It's really good. It's the same audio track on the Blu-ray and the 4K, and it's still a very solid audio track. You know, nothing that really took me by surprise. Nothing that was like, oh my god, that's awfully bad. No, everything was crisp and clear. There was actually a pretty good blend between the score and the dialogue. I really had no issues with the volume at all. I think they did a really good job mixing it. Like I said, I think the score to this film is fantastic. So I really think that, you know, as long as everything sounded crisp and clear, it's the best I could ask for. I think a 5.1, though, would have definitely been a big upgrade because there are a lot of moving pieces on this soundtrack, and I think it would have definitely worked better with a 5.1 than a 2.0, but that's just in my opinion. And as far as the visuals go, on the 4K disc, you're going to get Dolby Vision and HDR10. The Blu-ray disc is just going to be a compressed version of that down to 1080p, removing the HDR10 and the Dolby Vision. And the Dolby Vision and HDR10 do a great job, honestly, in my opinion, because the Blu-ray itself, it's a little bit darker than the 4K, and it also has a level of grain. Now, there is a level of grain on the 4K as well that's very noticeable throughout the entire thing. It's just floating that line between, you know, where it's going to be extremely noticeable to the point that it's annoying, and to the point where, you know what, it's necessary. It's really floating that line because you're going to definitely notice it a lot throughout the entire 4K experience, but the Blu-ray experience, it's even more noticeable in my opinion, but it's still nothing outrageous or something that's just worth complaining about because I think it is necessary. Like I said, this movie was shot on a low budget. They do a lot of scenes in the dark where really it's just being lit by headlights or just one light in the car, and the 4K really makes great use of the Dolby Vision in those scenes because the blacks are dark and the only things being lit are kind of just from the headlights, just like a fog or a haze, and then the characters in the car, and they're all lit perfectly. Like, I mean, the color in this movie is actually pretty damn gorgeous. It's the best about what you can expect for something like this on 4K, though, because, you know, a lot of it does take place in Arkansas, and like I said, a lot of scenes are at night. The day scenes, though, that's where the 4K really shines because they're well lit, and you get those beautiful colors just popping off your screen. The visual range is definitely very high on the 4K, and when you compare those scenes to the Blu-ray, it's definitely a noticeable upgrade, mainly in the day scenes, and on the night scenes, you know, again, it's eliminating a lot of the grain. So it is a really big upgrade to 4K. I can't compare it to any previous releases. So all I had to do was do some research and find out how those previous releases looked and just kind of do my best guess because, like I said, it's not the most stunning 4K I've ever seen, but it is definitely a noticeable upgrade over the Blu-ray that's packed in here. So it really is something that if you were just to buy the Blu-ray, I think you would still be pretty satisfied just because this movie is finally released on physical media. But the 4K does improve on that Blu-ray a pretty good amount in my opinion. And I do think that this movie is a very beautiful looking movie. It has some beautiful looking shots in it. It's just don't go into this expecting like on the levels of like the Mission Impossible 4Ks or even the Criterion collection. I don't think this lives up to like, or even comparing this to recent Criterion releases like Thelma and Louise on 4K. It's nothing like that, especially since, you know, we don't get as many options on here. Really, as far as extras go, there's really only one new extra, and it's a sit-down interview with Carl Franklin and Billy Bob Thornton talking about the making of this movie, how they came together. I absolutely love this conversation between them two. I was just locked in. I was really enjoying them. I really enjoyed both of their personalities, so it was really cool to have them sit back and go back to the early 90s and how their careers were before this movie and how this kind of helped their careers take off. You know, Billy Bob Thornton's talking about how many people say like his career got started with Sling Blade, but he always said no, it really took off with One False Move, especially since, you know, he co-wrote the movie. I think most people know Billy Bob Thornton as the actor, and they don't realize that this guy has a lot more talent than just that. He was also a writer back in the day. I don't know if he writes anymore, but he really was a good writer, and you get to see the thoughtfulness of him. You know, a lot of people might not really know the person Billy Bob Thornton. They might just remember him and his relationship with Angelina Jolie, or people like me who really got introduced to him through Bad Santa. It's really funny to see him in this interview just talking so intelligently with him and Carl Franklin and just going back. I eat that stuff up, and this interview is perfect, but that's really the only extra you get on here. You get one commentary track, and you also get the trailer, so that's really it for Criterion, who I always like to promote their extras, how good of a job they do. This is very bare bones, and I kind of understand because, like I said, not the most popular movie. I don't know how many people even realize that this movie even exists because it just kind of came and went unless you're doing your research. When you even research Carl Franklin, The Devil in the Blue Dress is what's going to pop up first, especially since he's only directed a few movies. He's really shifted into television since 1998, so He's not even a very well-known film director anymore, but I just absolutely love that one extra on here. I just wish we would have got more of it. And that's probably my biggest complaint overall about this 4K Blu-ray is I felt like they left a lot on the table that could have been done for this. I feel like we could have got a better audio track, we could have got better packaging, but that 4K disc is very solid, and for a movie that really hasn't gotten physical media releases, I really appreciate this going into the Criterion collection. If you can get this before the July 28th sale ends at around the $27 price mark, I think that's probably the best range for this kind of 4K, because it's not going to compare to like the Citizen Kanes, the Thelmas and Louises out there, or the Menace to Societies. So if you're going to be spending the same exact money, I don't think that's really particularly fair, because this doesn't have all the bells and whistles that those go for. But for the $28 4K price range, I think that's perfect, especially since I think more people should see this movie because it is very enjoyable. It'll leave you thinking, and you get some great performances in there. So what else more can you ask for? But I can't give this my highest score because I do feel like there are some pieces missing to this puzzle. So if I was going to give this a score out of 1 to 10, I would still give it a pretty solid 8 out of 10. It's definitely one that I'm going to be running back to, and one that I'm happy to have in my collection. But let me know, guys, in the comment section below, what do you think of this movie, One False Move? Are you going to be checking it out for the first time on this Criterion collection? Are you going to give it a pass? Or have you seen this before? Let me know in the comment section. And while you guys are down there, make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then after you're done doing all that, maybe head over to your local bar and tell all your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.